Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1002, Social Media Innovation. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the seventh lecture, which is entitled Music Has Always Been Social. You'll find the notes for this lecture, as usual, up on the DMU Commons wiki. Go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and just look for the TECH1002 or search for the page. And it's in the lecture notes section, and it should be in the week 7 section as a PDF document. So the topic this week is, last week what we looked at was the idea of symbolic interactionism and the fact that our meanings that we understand in our communities and the societies that we're part of are social, and that if we change and adapt the social arrangements, the social environment that we're part of, then we also change the meanings that we hold about different types of media, different forms and practices of behaviour, kind of social practices like rituals and exchange and identity and things like that. And likewise, if we change the social arrangements, we also change the meanings as well. So things are meaningful in a context. Things are meaningful in a social situation. There's something that are adaptable and that we create and generate the meanings that we hold for different activities, for different objects. We as people, it's a humanistic view, we imbue things with meaning in the interaction, because what we're trying to do is accomplish something. We're trying to move forward with something. We're trying to get agreement with people around us that we can come to a common understanding. So one of the ways that we do this as human societies, if you like, is that we use music. And what I want to talk about in this lecture and show a lot of clips to kind of lay off the heavy kind of conceptual view, if you like. But the idea that music has been something that we describe social media, but actually media has always been social. Music has always been social. It's something that we've shared. It's a shared social experience. We exchange ideas and understandings, and we do things, we gather together on the basis of our expectations of what music is and what it implies to us. And these expectations change over time, and they change, through generations and through patterns of social behaviour and through patterns of social arrangements. So what I want to do is just look at some of the kind of ways in which music has kind of is like skipping stones. This is very, very kind of crude and very quick introduction to the idea that music has changed. So we'll look at there's a really good documentary series which is on BBC Radio called Noise: A Human History, which is by David Hendy, who's a historian. I think he's the historian for the BBC, the official historian for the BBC now. So he produced a programme on Radio 4, which is about the way that humans have used and adapted to noise, what we might think of as sound. And how does sound and noise become meaningful is a really good question. How does songs have an emotional resonance? Bearing in mind that our understanding of different types of music are cultural and they're learned. So a Western appreciation of music is very different from an African appreciation of music, which is different from an Eastern appreciation of music. They have different characteristics and they work in different ways. And in the past, these things were very clear and separate. And now there's a kind of a mix-up, a kind of globalization has helped bring this about, where there's a mix-up of different kinds of sounds. So we can look at kind of the history of media, if you like, in different ways, and we can look at the history of music in different ways. And what I'll do is I'll put forward a couple of different views about the way that we might identify different historical periods, like epochs and what have we got? Let's see where I've said. Kind of different epochs, different periods. That there's a kind of slow transition from one period to another, or there's a sudden break or a rupture. And music can often be, thought of as something which is, on the one hand, something can come along which is revolutionary and completely different, and then it gets absorbed into our culture, or something can be alien to our culture, but it gets rejected and doesn't get absorbed into our culture. But I want to ground this in kind of a way which looks at examples of how music was shared and utilised in the past. So if we take, for example, folk music, how folk music is, a social experience passed from person to person, something that people used to remember and to identify with, gave people a sense of belonging, that kind of sense of folk ownership, which is kind of very common in European composition and kind of high music, if you like, in the 19th century, where composers travelled around Europe and they recorded songs and they turned them into symphonies. But it's also the technology that drives the sharing of music. Is also the social experience that drives the way that we think about music is also technological. In that, as we've identified previously, is that you change the technology, you also change the nature of how people think about music or meaning or media. And there's a kind of, so we'll trace through some different ideas, like the printed, popular music. We think of popular music as downloads, videos you can watch and stream online. But the craze for popular music started in the 19th century with the printing press and the availability of movable type. That meant that you could print sheets of music and give them away very inexpensively with newspapers. So it gave rise to the hit parade and popular songs, and it gave rise to Tin Pan Alley, where people wrote songs on the basis of their popularity and their, that kind of idea that you're writing something to be an earworm that sticks with people, that they can remember. So this kind of gave rise as well to things like, or fitted in with things like music hall and popular song, parlour music, Tin Pan Alley, and then we took a leap from, if you like, face-to-face exchange of music into the recording of music. So we look at the idea of the phonograph and the Shellac disc, the brittle Bakelite 78-inch disc that was kind of, drove popular music in the 20th century. And then things like broadcast radio, and what broadcast radio did to popularise certain performers and singers and songs. And then later on in the 1950s, you see the rise of the jukebox, which was an inexpensive way of leaving the home to play music and creating a culture. This is tied in with the rise of the teenager. Later on, mixtapes, celebrated in Guardians of the Galaxy, but the 80s mixtape is kind of, it's got a kind of, I made them, I used to make them, I'll be honest, I'm not going to bring them in and share them, but I made them. Now it's, you share, you want to tell your girlfriend or boyfriend what you think of them, so you give them a Spotify playlist. I'm not quite sure it has the same effect. But the MP3, actually we've come to the end of the MP3 now. The Fraunhofer Institute are no longer going to be licensing MP3 codecs. So we've lived through the MP3 and we're into new technologies that do a different job. So the whole kind of process of peer-to-peer networks and things like Napster that came along in the late 90s, early noughties, which changed how we think about music with the foreground of the online shared network-based culture. So which has led to the kind of streaming that we take for granted today. So there's a lot of examples for us to look at, a lot of topics for us to consider. So these will just be flagging up some issues where we're thinking about how the technology enables us to think about the shared social experience through music in different ways. Notes are up on the wiki, wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. I'll see you at the lecture if the weather's good.